thank you and welcome you all to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee in the Council Chamber this evening. If we go quickly to the agenda, I'm told that we need to deal with item 4 first. So over to yourself.
Hi, if we can just go to item 4, the appointment of a chairperson. Is there anyone that's nominating a cooperative member for chair? And second? Thank you. Is everyone in agreement? Thank you very much. Chair, if you'd like to carry on now. Thank you.
Thank you, members, for your confidence. I'm either doing a very good job or a very bad job, very good. But thank you for your confidence. The next item is then the Vice Chair. Can I have a nomination for Vice Chair, please? Don?
Chair, I'll stick to the same as last year.
Don?
For Don, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got a proposer and a seconder. All in favour that Don, the other independent member, be the Vice Chair? Thank you, members. Okay, to the agenda then. Item 1 is apologies for absence. I don't believe there are any. No. Item 2 is declarations of interest. There are none. Item 3, which is the minutes of the last meeting, which is pages 3 to 16, and this is for correctness only. Someone prepared to move, please? Oh, Jason? Move. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. All in favour? Thank you very much. Item 5, update on the elected member related party declaration forms. Oh, sorry, Norma.
I just make a point in relation to the minutes. I know I've gone about this every meeting, but there are no deadlines in the action table. And it's really important when we have an action, we have a deadline. And I notice it's good that it's a rolling list of actions now, but it would also be helpful if in the minutes the action was noted, because I find myself going through the minutes, looking for the action, and then having to check on the table that it's been taken account of. I just think it's good practice. If that could be done by
Can you pick that up?
Please, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Norma, for that. Update on the elected member-related party declaration forms.
Thanks, Chair. Just to report to the committee that we have 50 out of 51 submissions completed.
How many?
50 out of 51.
Okay. And we do, I assume we know who that one member is?
Yeah, we expect that to be handed in imminently. We think that'll be closed off tomorrow.
Okay. Can I suggest then, if he doesn't, or she doesn't amend it, then they'd like to come to this committee in July to explain why they didn't sign it within the due date?
Yeah, I will give you an update tomorrow, Chair. Hopefully we'll be closing that one off.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 6 then is the call-in from the Strategic Director, Transformation and Corporate and the Head of Finance re the purchasing card transactions resulting in an unsatisfactory opinion. Reece, you taking this or Marianne?
Do you want me to start?
Who's taking it?
Yeah.
Donna.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the last committee meeting, members of the Governance and Audit Committee agreed to call in the Strategic Director and Head of Service, who have overall responsibility for the P-card system here in Newport. So the purpose of the call-in is to consider the explanations and assurance provided by them in relation to the unsatisfactory audit opinion and the concerns raised by internal audit that improvements have been made. So the proposal is for the Governance and Audit Committee to accept these, which will be confirmed by the planned follow-up audit by internal audit during the year, or if they don't accept the explanations and assurances provided today and in the papers, escalate their concerns to the Chief Exec and the Executive Board. So just in terms of the P-card audit, this is a high-level review which we complete annually, and we select a sample of transactions that have taken place. The P-card 22-23 audit was in relation to transactions 21-22. A summary of the main weaknesses from the audit are detailed in section 7 of the report in your papers. In terms of the actual audit, this has now been finalised with a final report and action plan in place, and this was issued as final in March 23. From the papers, you'll see that Appendix 1 of the report shows the agreed final action plan, and there's also a current status column provided by the responsible officers. And then there's Appendix 2 and 3, which details management and senior management actions since the draft memo was issued in November 22. Appendix 2 also has a current status column which has been provided by the responsible officers. And I'll hand over to Rhys and Myrian to provide further details and take you through some of the actions and assurances.
Thanks. We've not only got any specific actions that mainly has been in my area, but also wider organisational action plans in Appendix 2. They've all been completed at this point in time now, so this has received the highest level of attention given the nature of the audit and the results, and at the highest level as well. And as Donna has said, this will be subject to an annual follow-up, and we'll be clearly expecting a significant improvement in this area next time we look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Myrian. Rhys, did you want to add anything?
Thanks, Chair. I think Myrian's pretty much covered that off. So, you know, the memo came from internal audit to senior management in November. Fairly significant action has been taken as a result of that. I suppose some context around some of this. I think the period of time in which this audit was undertaken is really important. It was the back end of the COVID pandemic. We were operating in a significantly different way than we would ordinarily do so. I think it's also really important to say why we've got purchasing cards within the organisation. Quite a lot of our activity has to be responsive on a day-to-day basis. We certainly don't want situations where we have to manage things like petty cash. Purchasing cards are there to ensure that we can undertake those things we can't do in any other way. I think what's being picked up by the internal audit process is a drift on that aspect, where cards were used to do things in an easier way rather than actually as an absolute final part of the process. So that's been really useful. That's been picked up. Policy has been completely rewritten and reissued. New online training program has gone online on, I think, the 15th of May, Myrian. And there's a deadline of the 23rd of June for every supervisor, authoriser and P-card holder to go through that. If they fail to go through it, their P-cards will be cancelled and removed from them. To date, out of 217 people who need to do that. After 10 days of that training being live, 77 people have gone through it already. So we're a third of the way through that. So it has been taken incredibly seriously within the organisation. And it's good to see that at the point at which it's come to governance and audit, actually all of the actions that have been put in place have been completed for it as well.
Yeah, thank you, Rhys. I'll make some comments at the very end. But before that, any questions from members? Norma?
Thank you. I mean, I have some confidence. I did have some other questions, but I have some confidence after hearing more confidence what Rhys said. You know, this has been a very worrying issue, and I think all members of the Audit Committee will think that, and it's good to hear that the Council are taking it very seriously. I don't accept the COVID because a policy is policy and people should be following it and they should be managed accordingly. But, you know, when I was going through the action list, you talk about capability and disciplinary. Now, to me, these issues are disciplinary matters. They shouldn't be capability matters because there's not much capability in operating a credit card, for example, or supervising, you know, the credit card sort of process. So I did, that question sort of arose in my mind. Training, it's good to hear, has been taken up and there's a deadline. And I just hope and would look for assurance that actually that will tackle the root cause of the problem. Because the impression I'm given, and I haven't got, you know, enough detail in front of me to make this assumption, is that management is lax. And that's what it leaves me with, really. It needs strong management, strong supervision. And I'd want some assurance that the policy is robust enough as well.
Yeah, no, fine with that. So I suppose to go along with that, I think in Appendix 2, there's some of the management actions. So as part of that, there's a monthly exception report that comes out. So we've got assurance that people are adhering to the policy. Without going into any detail, obviously, because I can't around any of the sort of HR processes, capability is a perfectly legitimate part of that HR process. People don't willingly always make mistakes. They make mistakes because they don't understand processes. So I think that will always be part of any HR process that we undertake. My comments about COVID are specifically to do with the fact we were operating in a remote way. Some things were harder to do than previously, and I think that sometimes does have an impact on management controls, which I think is the point you were making. So I think what we've got here is a significant reset on what we were doing and how we go about doing it to ensure that actually there can be no ambiguity in any of those processes now.
Has any disciplinary action been initiated as a result of what has happened?
The council will take appropriate action against anybody. I'm not going to talk about any disciplinary processes.
I wasn't interested in individual cases, but it's actually that we take in disciplinary action when there's been serious misuse. I'd like some assurance around that. Okay.
I was going to make a similar comment, actually, that what surprised me a little bit about this is that what I read into this, I should say, was that I very much felt that if I think described here as, I was going to say line managers, was described in the report here as card supervisors. If card supervisors are actually carrying out regular checks, that I'm assuming that this situation wouldn't have arisen in the first place. Because, my experience of management is that the word advised is used a lot in the report, that people are going to be advised of responsibilities. And my general experience of management is you can advise people as much as you like, but unless there's some robust system actually of ensuring they're taking the advice on board, it doesn't often get very far. And the word robust has been used, and the main question I wanted to ask really is just quite how robust some of the processes are. If I take that one that I quoted on page 25, that card supervisors are advised of their responsibility for making appropriate checks, is that it? Or is there some sort of process for doing that? Like a card supervisor is expected to check, I don't know, depends how many cards they're looking after, 5% of the cards every month or 10% to do a sample every month. Are those kind of hard processes built into this?
So, Chair, so for the word advice, you can also read reminded as well. And the policy is now, the language in the policy has been made more direct as to what is not acceptable. And the training also has very direct references to what is not allowed and what happens if those things still happen. So we have strengthened, shall we say, the directness of the policy, and that's replicated in the training. And through the actions that you see here, cardholders and supervisors have been reminded of their roles and what's expected of them.
My question really was, is that made specific, like you've checked 5% of cards every month or something of that sort, so they know when they've actually fulfilled their responsibility in a definite sense?
The e-procurement team will every month send a notification to heads of service if card supervisors have not authorised the transactions on that card in any particular month. It will then be for the head of service to speak to those individuals. And then internal audit, as you've just heard, do work in this area on an annual basis, where they'll check a sample over the previous financial year.
I don't think that gives Councillor Cox the reassurance he wants, Myrian, in my view. I think it doesn't give me the reassurance that I would be expecting. I think, is there anything in the policy, or could the policy be amended to be a bit more robust, to say on a quarterly basis all supervisors will carry out a 10% sort of dip test on the purchases? Because whilst the authorisation...
They do them all. They check all of
Ah, right, okay.
That's what Myron was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Every transaction on a card has to be approved by the supervisor, including the supervisor should be checking the supporting documentation for that transaction, be it and of course what we would expect to see is an invoice or a receipt.
Okay, yeah,
every single transaction. Yeah.
Yeah, reading through the document, there's quite a number of, almost every, I think, agreed management action references an email has been sent. What reassurances can you give us that, one, those emails have been read, two, they've been understood, and three, that they've been actioned by the people that you're sending these emails to?
I think that's a valid question, because I don't think it's absolutely clear in this. So a series of things have happened. So an email has gone out, management teams have had conversations, we've redone the policy and relaunched the policy to everybody. The training module picks that up, and actually we're doing monthly checks on what's going on as well. So I think there's a raft of different things within that, and also the sanctions associated with not following the process completely have been included within that as well. So the email bit is a part of that I think that process of different things that have
has somebody signed to say that they fully understand what is expected of them?
They will have to do, and it will be recorded on our Meta compliance system that they've undertaken the training, they fully understand.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think you said there's about 250 odd cards in circulation.
217 people.
Okay, right. What's the sort of limit on the card? What's the greatest expenditure that can be done? And would it have to be pre-approved or post-approved?
So the cards come with a standard transaction limit. We've got Richard Leake on the online. Richard, are you able to confirm what the standard limit is?
Yes, of course, Marion. The standard transaction limit when a card is issued is £100 per transaction and a monthly limit of £5,000. The standard transaction limit can be varied with card supervisor or head of service approval if it needs to be increased. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So there is a standard. It can be varied if there's justification to meet the service need.
Thank you.
The questions. I've just got a couple. On that point about the service lead increasing the threshold, Myrian, the £100 or whatever it may be, or the £5,000, do you think that someone in your office should approve that rather than the service manager? Because ultimately, you as the 151 officer is responsible for this in totality. So I'm just wondering who is going to check that from your department, because the service manager could just say, and I'm not saying they would, but, you know, we'll raise it to 10,000 or 15,000 or 20,000. And the first you know of it, you have an invoice in for £20,000 because someone's bought a whatever. So I'm just wondering, does there need to be a check and balance if someone's going to authorise anything over, say, £5,000? in the month, because that's a lot of money. I understand most probably done children's services and a few others, but it is quite a lot of money of which one individual's got complete control of.
Yeah, well, so you've just heard the Richard Leake there, the procurement manager. It would come through his team, and they would do a reasonableness check. They understand the service areas, and they would know if something looked, something unusual, and they would speak to the head of service and understand it. And if they weren't completely happy, they would most likely come to me and say, this has happened, what do you think? So I think that check does happen. Somebody in the e-procurement team does look at all these applications from a reasonableness viewpoint. Yeah.
So as long as you're happy with that as a policy, that satisfies me. In the appendices, clearly we've got the issue on page 29 at 3C, which is about the training, which you've raised. Reece, going live 15th of May, all card holders to complete by the 23rd of June. 77 have already done it, which still leaves whatever 100 and some odd outstanding. If they are not completed by the 23rd of June, is that the dead cut-off? You're not going to give anyone a week's extra time or 2 weeks extra time. A month and a bit is quite a lot of time, really, to do this. I would be suggesting, if possible, you cut them off. If it's not done by the 23rd of June, end of story, because, it all goes down to the email points. Not everyone reads emails, et cetera, et cetera. But if the purchase card is important to one of those 217, then they need to do the training. And what I would be asking is at our July committee, we get an indication of a little report as to who has not, the numbers, not who, numbers who've not completed it, because it is important, this.
Yeah, so I'm sure that we can offer you that figure. The intention is, yes, if the training hasn't been completed, the cards are put on stop until such time as they do complete the training. And all new card holders are required to also do the same training before they're issued with the card as well. Okay. So that's in going forward.
Okay. Reece?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Just to clarify a figure I gave, 217 people have got to go through the training. 33 of those are supervisors, so there's 184 card holders and 33 supervisors. All right, just for the record.
On page 31, we've got the action for a completed, which is the service manager, procurement and payments. And then we've got communications to be issued to all staff regarding parking, oblique speeding tickets when using a vehicle on council duty, and the procedures which must be followed. We've got work in progress there. So is that work in progress in regards to the communication? And if so, it says policy to be updated and comms to be issued. It says fleet management then implementation date 20th of June. But clearly the implementation date of 2023 can't be implemented until they actually get a policy which will be updated and the comms will be issued. Do we know when that's going to be done?
I don't know. I don't know if Richard Leake is still with us and knows the answer, but if not, we can get you an answer.
Yeah, I'm still on my Miriam, but no, I don't know the answer to that. That's sat with HR and the fleet management teams, as far as I'm aware. It's not a procurement issue, that one.
We'll come back to you on that one. So hopefully, certainly by the next meeting.
Okay, 4B is also the same. Myron, 4B is the same.
Yeah.
And I've got to say that HR has sort of dragged their feet on several issues coming to Audit Committee in the past. So I'm just wondering, whether they can just be given a nod, Reece, as to, if these things need, if we're taking these seriously and the management team and the CMT is taking it seriously, we don't want the HR team holding it up.
I'm not sure what are the other issues were that you're referring to there, Chair, but there's a couple of different bits of this, so we'll get an update. It's not just HR.
point which Norma made was on page 36, number 5, assessment of the requirement for further investigators the need of the inappropriate uses of the card. You picked that up, Reece, where it says further investigations currently underway. So, you know, I'd like to endorse what you said there, because obviously we raised it last time about whether there was any criminal proceedings, and there wasn't. But disciplinary proceedings and will follow where appropriate.
Yes, Chair, and you know, we're not. There's nothing. You know, there's no criminality here. There's nothing fraudulent. There's inappropriate and improper use against the council's policies. So, you know, and on this matter or any other matters, you know, we will follow the appropriate HR processes, and disciplinary action will take place if needed.
Yeah, thank you. And then the final question, which is on page 39, point 7, it says, agreed by CMT, look at putting together a training module or video for all card holders to undertake and for all new card holders to complete prior to the issue of the card. Is that a positive action? And if it is, when's it going to be done and who's going to do it?
That's the training module that's completed, which is the 77 already completed that Reece was mentioning.
That's great. I just wondered whether it was something completely different because it was there. Okay, thank you for that. Are there any comments? No, I just make a comment. I think you've made great progress from where you were. Clearly, it was sort of an interregnum, really, between COVID, you know, sort of crisis time in reality. But I'd like to thank the audit team for picking it up. Clearly, it shouldn't happen twice, two satisfactory reports. But it has been picked up now. It's been taken seriously by CMT and presumably the executive board. Once was it? Sorry, executive board. So, you know, many thanks for that. And clearly, it does need to be ongoing, and hopefully the next internal audit review can take place within 6 months if we can do that. Is that achievable, Donna?
Yeah, that should be.
Yeah. And if Myron or Reece could let us know once the 23rd of June date goes and when you've cut off the system, because I don't think there's any excuse in reality. If they're not doing the training, then clearly they don't need a card, clearly. And then we'll see how many people bleat. Okay. If there are no other comments, we've got the recommendation before us. And the recommendation, which is on page 17, there are, well, two proposals. Firstly, we accept the explanations and assurances of the Strategic Director and Head of Service, which will be confirmed via a follow-up internal audit plan for 2023-24, or we don't accept the explanations. Someone prepared to move number 1, which we accept. Thank you, Jason. Seconded, Norma. Thank you very much. Can I have a show of hands, please? All in favour? Thank you very much. Next item, which is 7, the update on the PTU taxi contracts, resulting in a second unsatisfactory opinion in January 23. Thank you, gentlemen, for turning up again. Who's going to take, Donna, you taking it first, or Steve, you're going through first? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, following the previous report to committee, a request was made for an update report on progress. So I've set out the report using the audit findings and agreed actions. Won't run through the detail line by line, Chair, but note that all agreed actions have been implemented and some actions noted as ongoing, those being business as usual type activities now. So at the last committee, there's also a number of questions, specific questions asked, and they're replicated and responded to at the end of this report. And finally, just to say that, to note that in discussion with audit colleagues, we're seeking to have the further review in late June, perhaps early July of this year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Any questions? Norma?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. A couple of things, really. In reading the responses, I can see that they are dealt with in the here and now. But what I was concerned about is the future management of it. You know, for example, what's been done to ensure that DBS checks are up to date. You know, it's like the action is completed, but actually this is ongoing stuff, so we need some assurance around this is going to be managed properly in the future. And then my other issue is I noticed that 3 members of staff are going to be employed for driving licence checking. And, you know, if I look back on my career, I always found it very sad that poor performing areas had extra resources thrown at them. And I thought, 3 people to check driving licence? And then the good performing areas that could be saving, you know, the council money, such as audit. we've raised that before about the, you know, the shortage of resources in audit, are kept short of resources. So it's like, do we really need 3 people checking licences when we need money in audit, because that's going to be saving the council, need resources rather in audit, it's going to be saving the council money in the longer term, medium to longer term. So those are my main issues on that point.
Stephen?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. If I can take the last question first. You know, it was recognised that there was pressure on the passenger transport unit. A business case was pulled together and presented to the exec board about, you know, where the concerns were, how the workload had increased, resources within that team, and the business case determined that that additional resource was needed. It's not purely for checking driving licences. There will be carrying out functions across the PTU, and that recommendation from the business case, the approval of the business case has now been implemented, as in 2 have started. The 3rd is due to start. So it was recognised as being an area that needed that additional resource in order to be able to fulfil the functions that it needed to fulfil and run an appropriate operation. In terms of the ongoing checks, the process is that driving licences are checked at the start of contracts, and also we are looking to do the dip tests to ensure that licence checks are kept up to date. I will just hand over to Alistair, as service manager for the area, to see if he wants to add anything to that, but that is covered off as an ongoing action. We will be continuing to do those checks.
Just to say more specifically to that, unfortunately the computer system that we use that houses all the data is not intelligent enough to actually fire out alerts to us when those, you know, the licenses checks are due. So we've had to actually develop our own processes whereby on a weekly basis we do go in and we make those checks, so that and also to give them ample time then to renew those DBSs before they actually expire. So that's happening now on a weekly basis.
Jason?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think I mentioned that question before back in the last audit, where the DBS checks are they're not given enough time to sort of issue them out. I mean, I have a few queries myself, but I'll speak to them myself, directly myself, because there's a few issues I need to speak to. But yeah, would they still put the DBS checks a bit longer, to take longer to?
Yeah, we're running a process where DBS checks will be highlighted as necessary 6 weeks before expiry. So it gives a reasonable opportunity for people to get those DBS checks back into us.
Yeah, so on that as well, with the DBS checks, when the emails get sent out, sometimes some of these people don't even get the emails either. So how would you sort of like get the emails to them? Because I know a few. Even taxi drivers have had the same problems. They said when the DBS checks are due, they're not getting the emails, or if they get the emails, they can't sort of fill them in and send them back to you.
Yeah. Sure, I'm informed as well as the email. There's a follow-up phone call as well if they don't hear anything back. So there is a follow-up on that as well.
Any other questions, anyone? Oh, I've just got a couple of questions then. The first one was on escorts. I think you've said all escorts have been trained, or training has been undertaken for escorts. Are you assured that every escort has received the training?
Yes, as I say, we're going through this weekly check at the moment, and the check that we had last week, everybody was up to date on that, and we continue that process then on a weekly basis.
Lovely. On the bullet points then, which were raised as questions, obviously education is a very important client to yourself. The comment there is there has always been a regular channel of communication between education and PTU colleagues, although a group was established last year to proactively improve upon this and now includes all stakeholders. This group meets on a regular basis. Can you just tell me when the group last met and whether there are any issues that arose?
Excuse me. That group last met, I want to say Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. And there are issues that we discuss at that group. It's a complex operation, and there are always issues that we have to resolve. So, yeah, that group has been really useful in highlighting, corralling those issues, so we can try and deal with them as best we possibly can.
Okay. And is the meeting? It says regular. Is it weekly or bi-monthly or monthly?
I think monthly.
Monthly.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And the same question really in regards to the internal working group is considered for further development to formalise the collaborative approach to monitoring and problem solving. It says as above, a collaborative and regular meeting has been established to address the issues arising. When was the last meeting of that group? And have you had any outcomes that would benefit the service delivery?
Yeah, that's the same group.
Same as the education group?
Same as the education group, with all stakeholders sit on that one. There's certainly some immediate benefits that we've had in terms of, without going into too much detail, ID and things like that, and how we roll out ID, and that's been put in place. And there's continuing actions where we're seeking to improve service generally for all users, from obviously the people having the transport themselves and those involved in providing the transport or receiving the pupils, or working across the authority.
Okay, and are social services on that group as well?
Safeguarding, aren't they? Yeah, the head of corporate safeguarding is an abuse.
Okay, because again, you'll be providing transport for some of their most vulnerable clients as well, so as long as they're engaged. Okay, thank you for that. If there are no other questions, any comments? No? Oh, Tom?
Just wanted to say, Stephen, because when you would be with us a couple of meetings ago, you got a hard time, and you said you were going to own it. You did. So it's really good to see the progress, and I know it's ongoing, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'd just like to, Paul, as strategic director, was obviously heavily involved as well, and I'd like to express the thanks to the team for the efforts that have been made. Thank you.
I noticed the strategic directors opted out tonight, but there we are. Clearly, the Vice Chairman has stolen my thunder there, because I think a lot of work has been done, and a credit to your team, Steve, for getting to where you are now, from where you were. The additional members of staff, I hope, has assisted you in that. Just to say, and picking up Norma's point, just to say that you'll be still on your mettle, because even though, as at the 11th of May, all the driver checks has been done and all the DBS checks have been done, etc., I would like you to provide a memorandum to us at the next committee, and maybe the one after, just updating where you are on your figures, because as is normal, people tend to forget, and then all of a sudden, I'm not saying it would go back to where it was, because this is an important area, but if you could just provide us some data to say, look, all the DBS checks are still up to date, escorts are still up to date, etc., etc. I think that then will continue to give us the reassurance, and then clearly Donna and her team will come in and, provide us with, hopefully, a satisfactory report in regards to this area of law. But can you just thank your team for the work they've done, and thank you and yourself there for everything. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll certainly pass those thanks on. Thank you.
Good. And tell the director I would have said thank you if he turned up. Next item on the agenda is a short update on the call-in of the Director of Social Services and Head of Service, re the internal audit of adoption allowances resulting in the second and satisfactory opinion. This is coming from Donna, but can I just, before you go, Steve, if you wish to go, you know, I know you may be interested in the work we do, but it's entirely up to you. You can stay if you do want, or you can go. All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So yeah, just to confirm, this was the second follow-up, so it is the third unsatisfactory audit opinion that we have issued on adoption allowances. The first unsatisfactory audit opinion was back in 2018-19, the second unsatisfactory audit opinion 2021, and then subsequently at the third unsatisfactory audit opinion, where the fieldwork was completed November-December 22, and the draft report was issued in March of this year. So just a brief update. Myself and another audit colleague met briefly with the Strategic Director, Head of Service and Service Managers yesterday, and they updated us in terms of where the current situation. So additional capacity has now been made available to support the adoption allowance financial assessments. There are some staffing challenges that they're currently dealing with. But in terms of where we are in terms of the draft report, there are discussions ongoing as to where adoption allowances are going to be overseen and those financial assessments. And I think the decision hasn't yet been sort of formally agreed. So as I mentioned, the audit report is still in draft. Following the meeting yesterday, service managers are going to meet to agree some management actions and put those together. And then we, internal audit, will be meeting with them shortly to agree that action plan and put timescales for implementation in place, and then hopefully finalise that audit report. I understand that the Strategic Director has agreed to attend the July Governance and Audit Committee meeting.
Well, thank you for that, Donna. I'm not going to allow any questions or anything of Donna because it's quite unfair, because obviously she's just relaying a factual update, which I thought you should be given as members. If Donna hadn't done it, then you wouldn't have heard anything, and then someone would have said, well, where's the update? So I'm not going to allow any questions or comments on what Donna's said. The Strategic Director will be coming to the next committee, which will then allow us to give a full level of questioning, and obviously Donna will have the action plan in regards to going forward. So you'll all have an opportunity at the next meeting to question the appropriate individual, namely the Director. So can I get someone to move that we note what Donna said? Someone move? Thank you, Gavin. Second, Don. All in favour? Thank you very much. Can someone pick that up with the Director of Social Services? Yeah. Can Councillor Horton speak to? Oh, there we are. Yeah, can I have a word with our Democratic Services colleagues there? I suggest you don't leave it wait months. But you should get a response, you know. I don't know what the performance indicator is for responding to emails. Good case of Gamper, which is there a need to know, but there we are. Anyway, on to the Treasury Management Report. Is that Myrian or you, Robert?
That'll be me. Okay, thank you, Chair. So obviously we've had our training session today, so hopefully some of this will accord with that. So in terms of the report in front of you, so this is the overview of the final Treasury Management position for 2022-23 financial year, and it follows the mid-year report you received earlier in the financial year. As always, it focuses on the final borrowing and investments position and outlines our compliance with prudential indicators set by Council just over a year ago for this financial year. It is generally a backward-looking report, but there is a couple of sections within the report which are more forward-looking, including the liability benchmark, which gives that sort of sense of where we're heading potentially with our medium to long-term borrowing requirement. As you're aware, the report then goes on to Cabinet and full Council, and as a committee you're asked to note the report and give any comments for their consideration when they receive that report. So in terms of the content of the report, so borrowing investments, the final position is highlighted there, so demonstrates or confirms that our external borrowing reduced by 3.5 million during the year, from 142.1 to 138.6 million. There was no new borrowing undertaken in the year. The reason for the reduction, we redeemed one small maturity loan and we made some regular instalments, repayments under equal instalment payment loans. So, that's a position that was expected. We weren't anticipating to have to undertake any new borrowing during 22-23, and that's mainly because of our high level of investments and our internal borrowing strategy. In terms of investments, they are also reduced. They reduced by 11 million from 58.3 to 47.3 million. Again, that was expected. We probably would have expected a further reduction than that, but due to factors such as slippage on the capital programme, continual receipt of unexpected grants from Welsh Government, that means that we're holding more cash than we would have anticipated, and in some cases still holding the cash from grants received in 21-22 as well. I think important to highlight that within that £47.3 million final investment balance is a new £10 million investment in covered bonds. So that was referred to in the training earlier. So we'd always committed to a 10 million sort of more long-term investment in line with our treasury strategy, and the fact that we know we need to hold a minimum of 10 million. So by investing longer term, we get a better return. But as we highlighted before, that the product that we've invested in is actually highly secure. There's sort of two methods of course there, and it's not subject to bail-in either. So a very secure investment with a decent return in terms of interest received. And those investments they vary. We've made 3 in total, coming to the 10 million, and they are for sort of periods between 4 and 6 years. So very much they're there now, they're locked in, and those returns are guaranteed for that period of time. The report also just confirms our position in terms of our prudential indicators. So Appendix B gives detail there, but what it confirms is that we did comply with all of the indicators in respect of last year. So moving on to the medium-term outlook, and I don't want to sort of repeat what was covered earlier on too much, but as everyone now understands, we've got the liability benchmark graph in there. That's now a requirement for us to report more frequently throughout the year. That gives an overview of the outlook for the next 10 years. And as we've covered before, it confirms the fact that we do have an increasing need to borrow, mainly driven by our capital programme ambitions, but also the fact that we have existing borrowing redeeming during that period, which will need to be refinanced. So what that shows is that most likely during the next 12 to 18 months, and again it will vary slightly depending on slippage and the cash balances that we hold, but we will need to undertake some long-term borrowing during that period. And obviously we have a decision to make in terms of when is the right time to do that, and we'll use the external advice from our Treasury advisors around potential interest rate movements over that period and when would be the right time to do that, because we need to balance the need to try and secure the best rate, but equally not borrowing too early and carrying that cost of that borrowing before it's actually required. The report itself talks through the way that the graph works in terms of what the different lines and shaded areas mean. And there's also a graph in there that shows what the impact of that capital programme ambition would ultimately have in terms of the revenue costs, and shows the fact that the front loading of the revenue budget to meet those aspirations is still currently seen as sufficient, but it is very much subject to, in particular, interest rate movement. So if interest rates at the point that we borrow are higher than we assumed at a particular point in time, then that budget may or may not be sufficient at that point. And just the final point to mention is that Appendix A gives that kind of wider economic context, and obviously it's moving all the time. So as we know, this week there's been announcements on inflation and probable movements now in terms of interest rates that weren't initially forecast. So again, the economic context is very much at a point in time, but it is important to understand that, as that ultimately is governing a lot of the thinking around borrowing and when we might need to do that. So that's the report. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Robert, for that very comprehensive report again. Are there any questions? I think most of them will have been asked earlier. Councillor Cox.
raised this, I think, last time we met, which seems a long time ago now. It relates to slippage, basically, because what I'm interested in really is how that is being managed, because I think I'm right in thinking that probably a fair proportion of that slippage relates to the school's capital programme, and which seems, and it just seems to be taking, because I ask regular questions about this because it greatly interests me, it seems to be taking an age to get the current capital programme together. It seems a long, long time since it was supposed to have been together, and I know there's been COVID, one or two other things. But what concerns me, obviously, is that it may look good on the balance sheet in that the capital requirement has not been quite what was expected of a particular year, but the consequences on the ground of that slippage, it seems to me, are likely to be very, very serious, in that building costs have escalated enormously in the period since this programme was supposed to have started and now. And I'm not quite sure what the plan is to actually manage that, which that's really what I'm interested in. Is the plan now to try and is the policy to try and expedite getting the programme together? Is there issues with the way that's being managed, or is the strategy to actually tell schools that, well, you were going to get this, but now you're going to get that? Or maybe is there some pressure being put on the Welsh Government to try and make up the gap that inevitably will exist now, I think, between the cost of what these projects are going to cost now compared with what they would have cost 2 years ago?
Yeah, so I suppose, not focusing on schools specifically, but looking at the programme more generally, the programme is set and agreed, so that's been approved. So Cabinet approved the programme. So that is there, and it's profiled as realistically as it can be. We are in the process of reviewing sort of governance arrangements around the capital programme to try and tighten up on that and manage the risk of slippage better. And a large part of that is actually when you profile a project in the first place. I would just say, if you take schools as an example, we shouldn't use COVID as an excuse for everything, but it is a factor. So initially you had a delay where some of those schemes couldn't be progressed, and then subsequent to that there has been an issue in terms of construction inflation. So it comes back to the point we were making earlier during the training that there is a balancing act to be had in terms of remain within an overall capital programme envelope and what can and can't be progressed. So that is being managed. It's never a quick process, but yeah, like I said, we are looking to tighten up the kind of corporate oversight of that, so that going forward we won't hopefully be reporting as many instances of slippage or such significant instances of slippage more generally. But yeah, obviously if you've got questions around specific programmes and what's being done there, then it's probably not for us to answer in this forum, but we can. Yeah.
I know last time when I raised this that I was told, correct me if I misunderstood this, but I was told that the Welsh Government has shown signs of indications that it may be sympathetic to authorities coming back in terms of this programme to maybe, well, I suppose in blunt terms, actually provide some more money to cover the escalation of building costs. I mean, is there any progress along those lines?
So Welsh Government are always open to discussions on that, because take Banby in its entirety across Wales, that was provisionally and agreed at a point in time, and clearly things change local authority to local authority. So there are opportunities to go back and have those conversations, and in some cases Welsh Government may be able to provide more funding, but that still requires us to be able to put up our share of the funding, because they have this 35-65 split. So there's a constant ongoing dialogue with Welsh Government around our overall programme. Like I said, they are willing to receive applications for more funding. Doesn't mean they'll get agreed, but they are looking to manage an overall programme across Wales, and there will inevitably be ups and downs, authority to authority. But yeah, like I said, it requires the council to be able to afford its share, and sometimes that can be the sticking point It's not always Welsh Government. Do we have the headroom to be able to meet our share as well? So, but yeah, those conversations are ongoing on a regular basis.
Yeah, can I say, Councillor Cox, I'm very interested in that discussion and debate, and I've given you quite a fair amount of latitude in regards to it. I think as a committee, we're just here to ensure that the council and the staff have got this whole treasury management and prudential indicators under control. And I think the questions you pose are very relevant, because clearly similar questions was raised this afternoon about increasing build costs, slippage, delay. It's great to have a school site. If you can't buy the land, though, you've got a huge delay in it. So all those points, and the points you quite rightly make, are important. But I think as a committee, we just need to be assured is the programme which the Council and the Cabinet has agreed moving forward is fundable. It's fundable within either its general reserves or its earmark reserves or its loans or whatever to meet that commitment. And I think, as Myrian said earlier, if any of that fluctuates, then the officers are on the ball and monitoring that. So in some respects, some things I think were said, you found money from slippages or some other way to pay for some of these projects, or otherwise some of the schemes may have to slip or fall off. And that's the task. But I think the questions you posed in regards to very specific matters, which you may be posing, clearly for a different place than this committee.
Well, with respect, Chair, I thought that if slippage was causing these major problems, part of the good governance, which this committee is all about, would be having strategies in place to try and mitigate the consequences of that. So, with respect, I did think they were quite relevant.
I think it's for a different place. Clearly, the capital programme has been shown on the charts here. You've got that, if we look at the liabilities, you've got that green line, which is your complete capital commitment, I presume, for which the council has agreed at this moment in time. And then you're showing your loans, and you're showing the difference between the red line and the green line, which is what you've got in reserves. And I think, while slippages may come into that, and I agree with that, they may come into that. But I think all we need to be assured about is there's money available to deliver whatever needs to be delivered in the capital programme. And if it isn't, what's in place to vary that? But at the moment, I hope that you're reassured that the money is there. That's okay, Councillor Cox. No worries. Any other questions?
Chair, I just have a question, but I wonder whether you can rule that it's inappropriate. First of all, I'd like to say what an excellent paper that was. Even before the training, I understood everything. It gave me the assurance I needed. And I think that needs to be recorded, because I think it was an excellent piece of work. So thanks to Robert for that. The only question I had, and it might be relevant, it might not, but thinking about bringing in as much money as we can to reduce debt, I noticed that we had 10.6 million of council-owned property. And I was just wondering, well, that's probably our offices, our schools, whatever. And I just wondered, I don't know how appropriate this is and whether Robert can answer it, is are we reviewing capacity going forward? And is there any means of, generating revenue for the future from that?
Yeah, it's not really anything to do with this, but as I'm sat here, I'm quite happy to do that. So it's a good point. We've got assets across Newport. They're operational in nature. The vast majority of our assets are schools. As far as square footage is concerned, we have got a commercial industrial estate as well, and some land. We have got a project in place around developing a new asset strategy, and maximising the income associated with the assets we got. And that could be through repurposing, disposal, community asset transfer, because that is within our corporate plan. enhancing the income generated through the commercial industrial estate. So all of that is in place.
So, sorry, can I just add to that? Just in terms of specifically in the paper, so the 10.6 million that's referred to is mainly our investment property. So it wouldn't include schools and things like that. These are ones that are, you know, no, exactly. So that, as it says there, it's mainly, you know, units and things like that, which would generate a return. Okay.
Question.
I'm hate asking this question, Rob. On page 50, in your comparison, you've got the investment at 47.231574, and then you've got accrued interest at 31,574. I hate similar figures like that. Tell me it's right. Number 13. It's on page 50.
Sorry, I haven't got the pack open. I've just got this single report. So
Oh, there you go.
no, take my computer. Sorry.
Can't see how they can both be added.
Sorry, can you just remind me what was the question?
I'm looking, it's just, I hate it, but you've got similar figures.
Oh, I see, right, so
you've got
yeah.
the accrued interest and you're adding on the accrued interest to the investment. It's only a small amount, but it's just because they're so similar.
Yeah, do you see what yeah. Well, yeah, I think unless Laura knows off the top of her head whether that is just complete coincidence or not, we'll have to obviously have a look at that, and if there is anything to adjust, we'll do that for the cabinet version, but...
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Myriam. But if you add 4 and 4, surely that comes up to 8, not 7.
Yeah, that
they're going to say rounding.
Could be
Come
roundings.
on.
There's some pence in there that aren't visible.
Okay, any other questions? Any comments, anyone? No. I'd just like to endorse what Norma said. Really good report, and also a good training session. So, as I mentioned earlier, thank you all for your input into that. So the proposal, which will be a recommendation, is to note the report on Treasury Management activities for the period 22-23. I don't think there's any comments from to Cabinet or Council, but you know, we could pick up the point Councillor Cox says to keep this under, you know, regular review, which I'm sure you do, Myriam, through other processes. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. All in favour? Thank you very much. Item 10 then, the Internal Audit Annual Report 22-23. Donna?
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, this is the Internal Audit Annual Report for 22-23 last year. So this is one of the annual reports we bring to committee on an annual basis. The report gives an overall opinion on the Council's internal controls for 22-23. The report also details progress against the agreed audit plan, which was approved by committee in July 22, and also provides a summary of internal audit performance against some local PIs. So the overall opinion on the Council's internal controls has been based on systems and areas reviewed during the year. The overall opinion given is reasonable, which is the same as previous year, which suggests the internal control framework is adequately controlled. All the audit opinions that have been issued during the year can be seen in Appendix B. In Appendix A, you can see the audit opinions that we use, ranging from good through to unsound. So in summary, it's pleasing to report that 9 good opinions were issued during the year. We also had 25 reasonable audit opinions, but we did, for this year, have 4 unfavourable audit opinions, 3 of those being unsatisfactory and also 1 unsound opinion. We also completed 4 grant claim audits during the year, and all were given unqualified audit opinions. So we were satisfied with the grant claim submissions. There were a number of audit jobs or planned audit jobs that weren't completed during the year, and we've noted these in Appendix C. Some of them were ongoing during the year and some of them will be brought forward into the New Year's audit plan. Work which was undertaken which is not given an audit opinion is also detailed in the report, and that can be seen in Appendix 2. That work ranges from financial regulations training that we provide, financial advice to all 11 service areas, also involvement in the annual governance statement as well. So in terms of the unfavourable opinions issued, paragraph 15 of the report details when these were last reported to committee or when they will be due. The unsatisfactories are in relation to PTU taxi contracts follow-up, which you've heard from the officers involved today. Adoption allowances was the other unsatisfactory, which you'll be calling in the Strategic Director for the July meeting. P-cards was the third unsatisfactory audit opinion, which we've had the call in at today's meeting. And then the unsound opinion, which will be committee's first hearing of this one, was in relation to safeguarding of children's money. So this hasn't been previously reported because the draft report was issued in Q4. So during the year, the team was supported by an external resource to cover some of our vacancies. 3 audit jobs were completed to draft by year end by the external resource, and we've got 1 audit that's currently in progress. During the year, the team followed up on previously agreed management actions, and that related to 21-22 finalised reports. We had 91% of these agreed management actions that have been implemented, and this has been confirmed by managers. The remaining 9%, there were reasons provided and revised timescales for implementation have been given. During the year, the team were also involved in the NFI data matching exercise, which is the biannual data matching that takes place, so this work is ongoing as part of the 23-24 audit plan. As I mentioned, we were also involved in financial regulations training sessions. We delivered 10 sessions during the year. So in terms of performance of the internal audit team, despite not having a full complement of staff, as mentioned, we had some vacancies in the year. The team achieved 77% of the audit plan against a target of 80%. Draft reports were issued within 5 days of the fieldwork completion, and then final reports were issued within 2 days of receiving management comments. Other PIs in relation to the audit team, which we calculate, can be seen in Appendix E. In terms of the staffing during the year, we had an establishment of 7.5 full-time equivalents. Mentioned 2 vacancies we had in the team during the year, and committee will be aware that one of the audit manager posts was removed as a budget saving for 23-24 onwards. Members will also be aware that the previous Chief Internal Auditor continued in his dual role with Monmouthshire County Council during 22-23, but since his departure this arrangement has temporarily been suspended. And just to make you aware that internal audits, external quality assessments, that's our self-assessment, which we have to do every 5 years against the public sector internal audit standards. That is now due, and this will be completed during the forthcoming financial year and reported back to committee. So that's the annual report. Happy to take any questions and comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Donna.
First of all, I should have to, again, it was another good report and good overall performance, despite them being, the audit unit being stressed on resources, which is pleasing to note. I've got 3 points, really. First of all, I was very concerned that audit are having issues not being able to access server level staff and documentation, which worries me, and I thought, isn't this an area that we need to be reviewing? You know, because that to me is just not on. And then the second point is, and it's a resource issue again, that 9% of the report's actions were not implemented, and that due to resource issues, there's no assurance that actions have been carried out. Now, that worries me in terms of an audit function because, you know, when I was dealing with audit reports, audit were always on my back to make sure I'd done what I should be doing when I was running directorates and divisions. And the third point is, I don't recall anything on the National Fraud Initiative coming to this committee, and I just wondered whether it should. So those are my 3 points. Thank you.
Deal with those.
So in terms of the first issue, so not having access to information and staffing, you know, we do escalate things where necessary. We involved heads of service if necessary, you know, as well as the operational managers. We make sure that our, you know, terms of reference of the audit are circulated to everybody involved to get everybody on board. But sometimes there are difficulties, but we do have mechanisms in place to try and overcome those problems if we are having difficulty with members of staff or access to certain information. Yeah.
Because, you know, you're trying to do a job and you're not having, you know, and the very fact that you've noted it, for me, that flashed up a concern. Because you're trying to do a job and do a job as effectively, and I'm sure you're doing a really good job. But if you're not getting access to the people and you're not getting access to the documents, you can't do your job effectively. You can't provide the authority with the assurance they need. And, you know, I understand that you escalated, but I look to Reece on this one. You know, is that something we should be looking at?
I'd have a very similar view to that. I think we probably need to have a conversation about how we escalate stuff. It would be totally unacceptable to me for an officer to be obstructive in any of the duties an internal audit undertake. So, yeah, I'd agree.
Of having to escalate that. You know, audit to me is like the police. You respond, you know.
You know, just picking up that point and Reece's endorsement, I think if you experience any difficulty in any audit you're undertaking, is that the next committee you refer it to us, because clearly, you know, Reece will then take that on the chin and take it to the management team and deal with the appropriate director. And if they're not prepared to deal with it, then we'll call them in. You know, because as you know, I think as Norm has said, this is fairly important work, and I'm not saying it's just this authority. There's other authorities who are exactly the same. Senior managers keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, and all of a sudden you've got an audit was due in 2017, still not done in 2023. And I think, you know, we need to draw the line somewhere and say enough's enough. You are going to be in audit is coming in, and this is the date they're coming in. And if you don't provide them with the necessary material, then as part of the process, you know, we'll deal with you as well. It wouldn't be a sledgehammer to crack a nut, because, you know, this should be, I know it's seen as a threat, but some people should see it as an opportunity, because we're looking to improve service delivery here.
Yeah, totally agree. Thanks, Chair. Norman, just in terms of, I think your third question, NFI, you're correct. We haven't provided any sort of detailed report at all that I'm aware of to Governance and Audit Committee in the past. I don't know, Myrian, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, that is true, and we will need to report this next one and make that a regular. I say regular. It's a 2-year cycle, so you won't be seeing those reports that often because they're done on a 2-year basis. But you should be seeing, and you will see in the future, every 2 years, the results of the previous NFI cycle and anything that came out of it. Yeah.
To say, you know, in another authority, I've seen those reports and I know what they're doing in response to it. So I've been asking the question to myself, why haven't I seen this in Newport? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think the other update we'll have, which will supplement that, is Audit Wales are currently doing a review of this authority in regards to counter fraud and the NFI. And my understanding is that we will get a report within the next 6 to 8 weeks. And clearly we'll have that report and see what it says. Rather than preempt that, let's see what the report says, and clearly there may be actions that need to come out of that. So I think it just adds more power to what you said, Myrian. But, you know, it should. I believe it should have been reported in the past, but we'll pick it up at the Audit Wales's report when it comes to us.
Thanks, Chair. I think, Norma, you had a second question. Sorry, what was it?
I don't think you can answer that, actually, Donna, because it's the issue about you haven't enough resources.
Yeah.
you know, and that's not in your gift, so, yeah. But I think the finance director will know, head of finance will no doubt note that comment.
Any other questions? Donna?
I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, Donna. The first one was, is there any reason why you think we as a committee should not be calling in the unsound report?
In terms of the unsound in relation to safeguarding children's money, we have finalised the report. There is a comprehensive action plan in place. We have had dealings with the strategic director, the head of service and service managers. So I'm aware that they've taken this seriously. I think it's also been to executive board and been raised there. I think in the past we've only normal sort of practice. We've called in the second unfavourable audit opinions. Obviously this is the first, but that's committee's decision.
Okay, thank you. Another question I wanted to ask was in paragraph, it's number 25 on page 70 on mine, and it's where you've delivered to 146 delegates the training during the year, and my computer's just gone off. There we go. And then what I've got then in looking at it is some HR are going to get involved in some training. The 146 doesn't mean anything to me, and I don't know if it would mean anything to the committee as to how many people who should be taking this training. I was just wondering whether there's any context that could be put on that as to how many should be taking the training, how much this represents, and what's going to be put in place to ensure that it's done.
I suppose some general questions on that. So we're going through a process at the moment of redefining mandatory training for staff. So I'd assume this would be on that list, Donna. I mentioned earlier, I think we mentioned in a previous committee meeting as well. So we've got in place now a new system called Meta Compliance. So you can push training out to individual members of staff, and we've got a record then of them undertaking the training as well. So that'll be done through that. Okay. So in future we'll be able to give some more meat to the bones on those questions.
Okay. I get very nervous with the mandatory training because this is a reoccurring theme that keeps coming up. So it's almost as if something that, and I know you're doing something about it, but it's just when it seems like it's happened a few times, you just get slightly nervous or apprehensive. I know you're looking puzzled, but maybe it's because I'm old. Every time HR and non-mandatory training come up, it just seems like there's a blip goes on, and I'm losing count of how many times I'm hearing it.
I'm not sure I would agree with that. We have a record of training we would consider mandatory. That changes on a pretty constant basis because stuff happens. The way that training is undertaken has changed significantly over the last few years because of the pandemic. It would have mainly been face-to-face up until that point, with some online training activity. A lot of that online training activity was undertaken through the NHS portal. The NHS portal has proved unreliable through that process. We've had to basically redesign quite a lot of those things. The training is not undertaken by HR. The system is an information governance system. The training is undertaken by service areas as required. The HR element of this is ensuring that we understand who should be undertaking which piece of training. So it isn't as simple as saying, we've had it twice, and I don't want to sound like I'm defending HR in any way. I'm just saying they're not necessarily HR issues. That was a range of different things. I think that the point is, mandatory training now will be centrally governed. We will understand much better about who should go on the training and the fact that they've done it, and we'll be able to report that, and the ones that are relevant to this committee, we can report that through this committee. It hasn't necessarily been that easy to do when we've had paper records for people attending various training in the past.
Got another question, but in regards to that then, Rhys, who knows how many individuals of this council has to do the mandatory training. And then who knows in this council how many have actually undertaken it and how many haven't. Because that's the issue, isn't it, really? It's to say, you know, training is mandatory, but unless you've got a system that manages that and says, right, 50 staff need to do it, here's the 50 staff. It's all online. You can see, as you said, like with the, just kind of training, 77 have done it, so there's X number outstanding. I think that's what's essential really here, because otherwise we're floundering in the dark, aren't we? So, and those who don't do the mandatory training, then I'd be asking, what is the sanction? Because if it's mandatory, that means it's very important and it must be done. So clearly it would be up to service directors, service managers to monitor that, but it's having that information available so you can do something with it.
Yeah, look, absolutely, and it is incredibly complicated as well. We've got about 5,700 staff, most of whom, 3,500 of those work in schools. They've got their own set of mandatory training they have to undertake through personal and professional development processes. We've got about 700 people who work in social services. They have their own set of mandatory training that they have to undertake, and that is recorded through WCCS and their social services systems. Corporately, we push out, not as consistently as we would like. I think that has been the issue. Not as consistently as we would like, a series of mandatory training modules. This is part of it. There are a range of other ones. And that will now be done through this meta compliance system. So we've got an absolute record of who it's gone to and how many of those people have actually undertaken it. So we'll be able to report that back much easier. You had a really good point, though. The complex bit in this is not the training and recording who's done it. It's actually understanding of the job roles and the mandatory training associated with those job roles. So there's also another piece of work going on about reviewing the job roles and job descriptions we've got across the organisation, because we've got about 850 different job descriptions that need to be worked through. So it is quite complex, but there is a solution to it, which is in trade. And I think that might not be wholly reassuring, but that is an accurate description of where we are today with it.
And I know you're doing an excellent job in protecting HR, but clearly those 850 jobs will have to go through HR to make sure they're consistent and all meet the right requirements, not through the service manager.
Well, obviously we've got job evaluation scheme and equal status. So it's complicated. However, there is a solution to it. Hopefully.
Your last question, Don?
Unfortunately not. Okay, there's another one after this. I just wanted to ask, because we've got Southwest Audit Partnership doing the work because we haven't got sufficient resource. What is the premium that we pay for that service over and above what would be our expected scale rate with the council?
Obviously, it costs more to bring in that external resource as if we would have someone in a substantive post. I think it's around 50%, about 50% of the audit days we would get from an external resource in comparison to somebody in one of the vacancies filled.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, last question. And this is because with the work that the audit are doing, I still think it's crucial. And this one's directed at you, Marion. Because like this and this report and the one we're about to look at, and you yourselves have said the committee should appreciate in one of the things, and we really do appreciate that we are under-resourced in this area. So I'm just wondering that there is a capacity issue in the internal audit team, and the loss of the post that we had in the budget where you had to make that decision, and then with Jan moving to Monmouthshire, and then with Andrew moving to the regional consortium. I'm just wondering, are you looking at solutions as well? Are you considering solutions outside the box and trying to address this issue, and whether that, you know, that possibly means joining the regional consortia? Are these things being considered?
Yeah, so resources is an issue. Audit is not the only area of the council that has got resourcing issues. We have challenges like every other council across the whole of the council. And clearly, if we had more resources in audit, it would provide more assurance, etc., etc. But unfortunately, you know, our resources are what they are, and we need to make the decisions. That does give us some resilience issues, you know, and actually having two people leave us quite, you know, at a similar time, both of them senior people, you know, you do have those risks, as it were. Therefore, we are looking at a different operating model and options, which does include looking at the regional service. When we made the decision to delete the audit manager role, we were at that point looking at Monmouthshire and Newport becoming even closer aligned. But now, we're now looking at a bigger solution, which is the regional. So we've already made some initial contacts, informal contacts, and we should have some communication back towards the end of the summer regarding, you know, is this going to be possible? They would like to. They're just working through some of the detail. And of course, as you know, Andrew's only just arrived there, and therefore he needs to just settle in a bit first before we can start talking less informally and more sort of formally. And obviously there's an internal communication and decision-making process around that as well. But, you know, at this point, I can tell you that we are looking at that. Hence, the arrangements that we've got temporary at this point to give us the maximum flexibility if that was to be an option for us to take forward. But the more junior vacancies in the section, we are looking to recruit into those. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. We've struggled to recruit into these roles, but we will be trying. And in the meantime, it's best to engage SWAP to do some audits rather than just not doing any audits, as it were. So that's just something that we've just got to do. And you know, there's an impact. It's more expensive, but it's better than not doing anything in the short term.
Are there any other questions? Okay, Donna, I've got a few. In regards to the appendices, I'll pick up the unsound children safeguarding matter funding in comments, if I may. But in regards to Appendix C, which you set out there, jobs in the audit plan, which were not completed by the year end, clearly there's a huge list there. I don't think I'm going through them, but there were 3 high risks. And I'm just wondering why those weren't dealt with ahead of medium risk matters, because you will have dealt with medium risk in the ones you've done. And secondly, out of that whole list there, how many of these have been carried over from last year, or maybe the year before, or maybe the year before that? Because obviously if they were that important 2 years ago and they still haven't been done, then they should move up the league table of some kind. And I'm just a little bit concerned that if they haven't been reviewed for 3 years, and they may be a priority for the director, clearly this is in discussion with the director and the service heads, then some of these things need to be done, and whether we actually ought to look at prioritising all high-risk ones first, and then if you can do the medium ones, you move on to the medium ones.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the initial question around the 3 high-risk reviews that we haven't completed, just to confirm that, you know, the corporate governance follow-up that was in progress at year end, it was just delayed in terms of starting the audit during the year. And car parks as well, I'm just about to issue, it was in progress at year end, but just didn't get to draft report stage. I'm just about to issue that report in draft shortly. and then the housing needs. That one in particular, I think we were asked to delay any audit in that area because of the new head of housing and community starting, which I think was in October. Having then had discussions with him, it was down to resources within the team, because you'll be aware when the principal auditors within the team was backfilling for the audit manager during the year. So it was started, but very last minute, I think, in the financial year in March, and that's currently work in progress. So those three are being addressed, yeah. In terms of the numbers that we're carrying forward, I'm just picking up some of the medium ones, particularly in the schools. We did have 3 schools planned, but you might be aware that we were refused entry based on from the head teachers because the action short of strike. So despite having visits booked, I think in February and March, I think once they'd spoken to their trade union, they cancelled the visits on us. Yeah, so the NAHT, I think the unions are involved. Yeah, and of course we relayed all that back to the heads of service as well if we can't get in for any reason. In terms of the actual numbers, I don't know how many we're carrying forward. Definitely some of the schools still in the audit plan because we've been asked to prioritise them, particularly by the Chief Education Officer. Looking down the list, probably most. We did have a couple of others still in progress at year end, like school admissions. That will be issued this quarter. The fieldwork's been completed. Planning contributions, that's another one. That's at file review stage, so that will be issued as well. I know Skills and Works contract, that's just started. And yeah, there's definitely a few others on the list. So they're definitely in the audit plan for majority are.
The comment on the education then, clearly if the Director of Education is fully aware and want these schools audited, then that, the Director really needs to speak to the head teacher to say we want to come in and do this. I don't know whether we've got any statutory basis to go in there. Presumably we haven't if they're freestanding, but they do have money from the authorities, so that will be an interesting issue in regards to if they're funded through the authority, then clearly we should have some checks and balances there. But this needs to be done in some respects with goodwill. But if there are issues in schools, then I think we just need to see if it is important how we actually get in there to do them, because there could be all manner of things going on. I'm not saying there will be, but there could be all manner of things going on in the school for which this authority isn't aware of. So I think it's working with the Director of Education really and trying to resolve that. Do you aware we've got any statutory basis to go in, Rhys?
Given that their action short of strike is also not to engage with Estin other than on statutory activity, we're pretty limited. I think I'm sure we could go in and audit. It's the provision of information and meetings that would be withheld from us, I suspect. Chair, if you want to put it down as an action, I'm quite happy for Donna and myself to have a conversation with Sarah Morgan, the Chief Education Officer, and see what can be done around it. But it's an ongoing issue for us.
My view is if you can't get in, take them all off, because why waste your time on them? That's what I mean. If we got statutory power to go in, then I'm sure Myron's got something in his financial provisions and his legislation, or the Barred Wired Act 1987 or something like that could be going in. But, otherwise it's not worth it, is it, in reality? Because, but I would have thought we've got some power to go in. We're bound to have, because it's public money. Okay, could you take it up with the Director? Thanks. No, that was that, I think. Okay, any comments?
Comment is whether as a committee, because we have set a precedent that where we see unsound, I appreciate what Donna said, that we do actually ask them to come in and have a chat. I guess my comment would be, as a committee, do we give this one just let it go, or do we call them in?
My comment was we don't let it go. I know that In the report, it says a final report's been issued, so presumably that's been issued this year now, is it? So the draft was available last year, and the final report's issued this year, because on page 78 it says final or draft. It says final. Second one down on page 78. So if there is a final report, and clearly there's an action plan, I would endorse what Don says. This is the first time we've had an unsound one. They were unsatisfactory in the past. And if we look at the table, you know, unsound says poorly controlled, major risks exist, fundamental improvements required with immediate effect, unacceptable levels of insurance. Now, if this is kids' monies we're dealing with, then that would give me concern, and I don't think we want to leave this go. If the director is working on it, great. And I understand the director referred this to Audit, is my understanding. So, you know, she's been open and honest there, and for which we've got to compliment her. But this is a matter I think we need to look at, because, you know, we're dealing with young people's money here, which doesn't belong to us. And if we haven't got any assurances or controls in place, you know, apart from the credit cards, they're spending money. Are they spending anyone else's money? I'm not saying they're doing that, but where is it and what controls are there? So, subject to what the committee agrees, I think we should call them in. That's my view. We should have a recommendation that they come in at the next committee. Sorry, Councillor Horton. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Norma.
Chair, I agree that we should call people in if it's an unsound report, because any unsound report is very worrying. One of my thoughts was, is there any reason why the committee can't see the full report? Because I often feel you don't get the full context. And, you know, if you had the full report before you, you'd get the context of it. And, you know, there might be stuff that, you know, they'd have to be redacted or whatever. But if you've got the full content, because what worries me, and I put it in my notes really, going through the papers, you know, we've been operating now for a year, and you get themes coming through about the poorer performing areas of the authority. And, you know, maybe that's because Audit have focused on that, but it is a bit worrying that this area is coming up a number of times. So, you know, if you see the full report, you do get more of a feel for what is actually going on in that work area, rather than, you know, sort of sanitised report just coming to us with action.
Obviously, I need to be guided by the director here. We may have to go into private session, I should imagine, to look at the full report. Because, again, it's going to say things that may name individuals, etc. So there will be provisions and the exempt information provisions. So I think it may well be worthwhile, certainly on this unsound one, that we deal with it in a private session. We can deal with the director on her adoption allowances in an open session, and then go into a private session, if that's the will of committee, to look at the unsound recommendation on children's funding.
Yeah, I think that's one way forward with it. But I will. So if you want to put that down as something you'd like to happen, obviously we'll need to have a conversation with the monitoring officer between now and the next meeting about how the best way to handle that is as a part two, either as a part two report or in closed session. I think the point about themes is really interesting. And I know we've had a conversation about an annual report, and that might be one of the things that the committee wishes to pull out as something like that.
Yeah, okay. But I think, you know, I agree with you, Norma. If you get the full report, you know exactly the background and what you've found, whereas currently we get snippets of information which you say are the most, you know, these are the things which we found, but you don't get the context behind it. So if you could speak to the monitoring officer for it, I wouldn't have thought there should be any issue really, because it's something we should be allowed to look at. Any other comments?
Just to say, can I formally move that we do ask them to come in and see us?
Yeah, okay. So the recommendation basically is the annual internal audit report 23 and the overall audit opinion be noted and endorsed by us. 2, that the Director of Social Services be called in for the unsound issue. I'm just going to pick up a comment which Dom made about staffing and staffing and capacity issues. I think maybe that clearly lots of the reports which we get from yourself, Myron, says about capacity and capacity issues, which is quite fundamental because every authority is shrinking and is juggling the books in regards to where it finds its capacity from. But I'd just like to pose this question to you as Section 151, because you have a personal responsibility to report to the Council if you haven't got enough staff to discharge your statutory responsibilities. And clearly, if we're failing in discharging some of those, I'm not saying we are, okay, because we could be doing the bare minimum, clearly. I'm not saying we're failing in them. But I think it would be worthwhile to look at maybe in the future, and I'll pick up the issue about Reece said about an annual report, maybe a short report setting out this to this committee, because if we can support you in it, because you've got a statutory role, you report to council, don't report to me, but from a governance and audit point of view, to get those reassurances in certainly audit, and it was expressed before, losing a staff member will have an impact, then maybe there's a time that we need to say it maybe before the next budget round. And it would also be useful, I think, given what you've said about restructuring the team in some shape or form, whatever that may be. And can you just note that I got to declare an interest because I'm on the other side with two authorities that within the regional consortium. But I wouldn't have any impact in what you decide to do. But I think there's an opportunity, as with any collaboration, that economies of scale, because everyone's trying to recruit the same people, and they're just moving around the bazaar, really, for the most money. And then to get some trainees, if a regional team could be constructed, utilising the vacant posts, utilising any external funding that goes out to third parties, even though I think you pick yours up through the vacancy factors, the costings of that, but the other authorities do exactly the same, then maybe we could, or you could, develop a team of individuals who are expert in the field and could deliver a better function for the council. You may take another view, but have your own. But I think it's well worthwhile saying, maybe a report from yourself to us saying, this is a really good way to go down. We do need a mature discussion in regards to how do you deliver it, because I've been there before and you have been before about collaborative agendas, but things have got to, the money's going to be tighter and tighter and tighter, and we've got to get the best bang for our buck and actually deliver the service that's needed.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I think that if we didn't have the level of vacancies that we have, it would feel very different than what it does at the moment. The vacancies is as much, if not more, of a problem than the total level of resources that is in the budget. And I think that's where the potential collaboration is going to have benefits, because it will be a more attractive organisation to get involved in, better career and experiences in there. And I think it'll have some resilience and some skill sets that we can't afford at the moment, such as IT audits, etc. So we've made the approach that was a welcomed approach, and we are literally just waiting for Andrew to just settle down into his new role and to come back to us at the end of the summer. But for the record now, my default is that we need to create this bigger team, because there's everything to sort of like and not a lot to not like. So that's where I'm going. And yes, the issue of audit resources is one of level of assurances. There are some things that we don't do as much as we should. You mentioned the fraud issues. You know what's coming, and so do I. So resources does have an impact on that, but generally it's around that assurance, that level of assurances that we are getting. You know, if Audit got around twice as many, departments, we'd have twice as much assurances and potentially twice as many kind of poor audits, which actually is very helpful in terms of then making improvements. So it's about the level of assurances. It's not an absolute thing, but I think that the regional body will actually help us. We've only got the resources that we have to put into it, but we will have a lot of other benefits that come out of it, potentially.
Yeah, thanks for that, Myron. So the recommendation then is that the annual internal audit report 22-23 and the audit opinion be noted and endorsed by the committee. 2, that the Director of Social Services be called in to the Net Governance and Audit Committee to deal with the unsound findings for children's money. And clearly you've been put on notice, Myron. We may need a report from you at some stage about capacity, not only of the audit team, but maybe of the finance team as well, because, if you haven't got enough people do the audit, the annual audit and such like, and you're stretched there as well, we just need a general overview as to what you think your staffing complement should be. But not now. Okay, we all right there? Right, can I have someone to move that then, please, if you understand it? Thank you, Don. Can I have a second there? Councillor Mogford. All in favour? Thank you very much. Item 11 then is the Internal Audit Plan 23-24. Donna?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Operational Audit Plan which we're proposing to committee for 23-24. The audit plan is based on assessment of risk and available resources, and the plan is based on delivering 862 audit days. Obviously that's been reduced from previous years given our deletion of one of the audit manager posts. So the plan's been compiled from a cumulative audit knowledge and experience. We've also referred to corporate plans, service plans, the corporate risk register, medium-term revenue plans, external audit reports, along with previous history of known problems, issues or risks. The views and concerns of service area management teams have also been incorporated into prioritising workloads for the audit planning process. Executive Board, all heads of service have also been afforded the opportunity to contribute to drafting the operational plan. So Appendix 1 in your pack shows a summary of how the audit resource will be allocated across the 11 service areas. And then Appendix 2 provides a more detailed breakdown of the individual audit jobs that will be covered during the year, and that's broken down by directorate and service area. We have included probably a new appendix in the audit plan report, so Appendix 3. This details the audit universe, so it's the majority of the same information in Appendix 2, but this has been sorted by date of last audit for the committee's information. So available days has been calculated based on known vacancies. As you're aware, we currently have 2 principal auditor vacancies within the team, and I'm currently acting Chief Internal Auditor 50%, whilst also carrying out my audit manager role 50% of the time. Currently there's no formal backfill arrangement in place for me, but this will need to be monitored going forward. Available days is based on some assumptions. So we're hoping to recruit to the 2 principal auditor posts from October 2023. We are also going to obtain 80 days of external audit resource, so buying in that. As we mentioned, that does come at a cost. Recruitment has proved unsuccessful in the past, but we are looking to recruit. But if we don't, if it is unsuccessful again, there is a risk that the less number of audit days may be delivered. So we have to balance the plan with the resources we have available the best we can. The 23-24 operational plan aims to cover the areas stated within the given time allocations and will provide assurance to managers on the effectiveness of their internal controls and safeguarding of assets of the authority whilst covering the key risks. An element of the report I wanted to bring to committee's attention is our intention to revise our audit opinions for 23-24 going forwards. You'll be aware the previous suite of opinions ranged from good through to unsound, so there was two favourable opinions, 2 unfavourable opinions. The revised opinions that we're proposing will be based on those recommended by SIPFA, and it's a standardised approach to internal audit opinions across the public sector. The new suite of opinions can be seen in paragraph 27 of the report. Again, there's 2 favourable and 2 unfavourable opinions, and one of the opinions, I think the reasonable one, does match. So in terms of the 23-24 operational plan, we've got 48 opinion audit jobs and 27 non-opinion audit jobs. That also includes the grant work which we plan to undertake. We've included allowance for special investigations and some unplanned work alongside sort of our annual piece of work that we do, as mentioned, financial regulations training, compiling the annual governance statement to support the accounts, and financial advice across all the service areas. And as we talked about, there will also be some carry forward jobs from the 22-23 audit plan that we didn't get to complete. Or some of those will be finalisation jobs. So that's the audit plan, operational audit plan for 23-24. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna, again. Any questions? Don?
I was just going to ask, Donna, in Appendix 3, would it be possible with that you, on that Appendix 3 where you've got them listed, that we could actually have the risk column in there as well, so we can see that? The other thing I wanted to ask is, in Appendix 3, we've got 74 areas which have never been audited. I know it's going to kill you, isn't it? It's flying right behind you, and it's now looking and see if it can give you the answer. 74 nevers is, and we've got 223 items that have not been audited after 2019-20. How material is this?
Thanks, Member. That's a very good question. Yeah, there will be some things that we have never audited, and there might be a number of, like sitting behind the audit planning process is lots of information and further detail in terms of how we arrive at that audit plan. You know, it is based on the available days. We do have those discussions with heads of service and directors in order to see what the priorities are. Some things get bumped, I think, some years. Sometimes we have to do those annual audits, follow-ups we have to prioritise. Grant claims, if there's a requirement on internal audit staff, then we prioritise those. So that all comes out of our available days. We do start with a very long list of what's due, I think, because we based it on a 5-year strategic plan. Probably COVID's had an impact, probably a couple of years. We've probably had jobs that have been bumped again, and again based on available resources. We've talked about it, struggled with vacancies, so we haven't been able to complete as much of the plan each year, and I suppose that's had a knock-on effect. How we prioritise the jobs, you know, it is subjective. It could be based on our audit knowledge. It could be a new audit area that's come onto the audit universe, and things get prioritised and sort of bump up again, you know, ahead of other jobs, and we have to have that cut off. We also have a mix of auditor skills and grades within the team, so we have to consider that. And then there's also, we have to have some broad coverage across all areas. So it's continually having to balance those sort of priorities, risks, against available resources. So yeah, there's lots that we haven't audited. And there's probably some things that we might not get round to, just because of priorities and risks throughout the year. And that's ever changing each year. But we do have those discussions every year in order to arrive at this audit plan. And again, it's based on priorities, risks and available days.
Any other questions? Councillor Cox.
You talked about...
Mike, can you put your microphone? Thank you.
Joyce, you talked about the sort of factors you take into account when you're putting this plan together. in terms of doing that, I was interested. Is it largely the head of service who plays the major role in actually assessing the actual level of risk? I mean, obviously, there's a level of risk put by each of the jobs you're planning to take on next year. I'm just wondering how that arises. Because I'm assuming, I mean, you know, with all the best will in the world, you're not going to know the details of the working in every single department. You're going to have to rely on somebody. I understand this head of service.
They do have some influence over the audit plan, but there's probably lots of influencing factors. The corporate risk register, service plans that we look at. But yeah, it is influenced by, we do have those discussions on a regular basis, and particularly, when we're setting the audit plan. But they're not the only influence. They don't determine what's in the audit plan. The audit plan goes in draft to executive board as well for comment. So we do have that independent review. It also goes to Myrian before as head of finance as well. So there's lots of influencing factors, lots of people that do see it and able to sort of comment on the audit plan before it's approved.
Could it add a little bit to that? That the whole thrust of the council budget strategy this year was to focus, because it was a very, very difficult year, was to focus on those people, the services delivered to the most vulnerable, to the people with the greatest need. That was given as the major priority, and that because we've had this really difficult budget situation this year. Plus, on top of that, of course, we've had a massive crisis in terms of the cost of living, and in terms of the council delivering its services, I wonder how that's played into this, because, for example, the one that caught my attention was education, where it seems to me that was one area where it seems to me that there was a need to be quite confident that the council was delivering the sort of services that it planned to deliver in terms of in the most vulnerable, the most needy. And, in the audit plan here, it actually says things like children with additional learning needs, etc., that vulnerable children going to out the county placements, etc., etc. Now, those seem to me to be the ones that really would be of some concern in the time of the financial restrictions we have and the sort of the cost of living crisis we have. But they're not being audited. I mean, the ones that have been chosen are the school meals contract. Now, I know, if I talk to my grandkids, the most important thing about school is the school dinners. But with respect, it doesn't seem to me that was necessarily jumped out to me as a priority if we were really concerned about the most vulnerable and the most needy. And I think there are a number of examples like that through here.
Thanks for your comments, Councillor. I think, as I mentioned, there's lots of influencing factors. We do have those conversations with heads of service and service managers. They've all got an opportunity to contribute towards the audit plan. We also, find out our own information through the corporate plan, the corporate risk register. So the key issues that you've mentioned, sometimes they may not feature in our audit plan, but there might be other reasons. Like I said, there's lots of detail and information that sits behind the operational audit plan and how we've arrived at it. There could be other internal reviews of service areas that we might not, so we wouldn't want to duplicate any work. There could be external third-party inspections taking place, i.e. ESTIN or CIW. So again, we wouldn't audit Wales, so we wouldn't duplicate any of those work. I suppose I can only assure you that we do have those conversations. All the factors are considered when taken into account in sort of allocating our available days. And we do have to have that broad coverage and focus on the high and medium risks. And unfortunately, given that it's balanced again against the available days, so some things don't get covered. But, you know, we can have those ongoing conversations with heads of service during the year. So if there is something that comes up, then we could look to replace audit jobs or prioritise for the next year.
Yeah, Donna's pretty much there. The only thing I was going to say is, so every year we have a workshop with our regulatory bodies, so Estin, Kieran Wales and Key Inspectorate Wales, and Audit Wales, to look at the work they're doing as well. So obviously Donna's team fit into that overall assurance framework. So a lot of the things I think you mentioned, they would be on, often be on a work programme of Estin, particularly around some of that. But I think, Chair, that's a valid point that if the committee chair chose to, could note for review with the audit team and the head of service.
Sorry, there's just one quick question. I notice on just taking, I thought it was easier to make some of these points just by using examples. If we take education, for example, overwhelmingly your resources being put into going into is auditing schools. I haven't actually done the sum, but it must be overwhelmingly the majority of the time you're giving to education is going into schools rather than other areas of the service. And I know that the bulk of education budget goes into schools anyway. But when you go into schools, are you just reviewing the actual school budget and school spending, or are you reviewing things like, I don't know, school exclusions, whether the required procedures have been followed in terms of those, whether children, for example, with additional learning needs are receiving what they're designated to receive under their the agreed plan in terms of meeting their needs.
In terms of schools, we do have sort of a standard work programme. We do look at budget, but we do look at a lot of other areas. We look at governance, we look at purchasing, we look at income, banking, we look at their statutory policies. So we have got a standard audit programme that we do go through when we audit those schools. You mentioned exclusions. We've done a themed review on that area across education, across the schools. So as part of the school audits, we wouldn't complete, say, that area as part of an individual school audit. Each audit has a different scope. Again, it'll be balanced what we can cover in the available days, but very much, there's a range of different areas that we cover in the school audits, not purely financial administration, but other areas as well.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add into that, and just for assurance, so part of the function of our central education service and the education service that covers Gwent is to give assurance around some of those things you talked around exclusions and support for vulnerable pupils, etc., etc. So that is picked up through those services. That is essentially their function. Okay.
Norma.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, that discussion prompted a thought of mine. There's been a bit of a concern as well in terms of the reports done by Audit Wales. I don't remember seeing any of those coming to the committee. And these audit reports, I think I'm right in saying that, aren't I? I think these... Is there? Right.
Part of the regulatory reports which come, I think, on a periodic basis.
Sorry, I've missed that. But it's really important, isn't it, as a committee, that we know that the council is addressing the actions in those. And I may have missed it, but I can't. There was a meeting I missed. Can't. Please go on.
Sorry, Doctor. So you get the reports, those regulatory reports, and it is part of the terms of reference to the Governance and Audit Committee. Actually, part of your statutory responsibilities to monitor our work against the recommendations that come out of those regulatory bodies. So you get that report, I think, on a 6-monthly basis. So you should have that in the next meeting.
We have had the reports, Norma, and as Rhys has said, What tended to happen in some authorities is they'd audit Wales or Estin or CIW report, and all of a sudden they're lost in ether. And I think that's an essential part of a tracker, because if we get a report from Audit Wales or some other, and there are specific recommendations, then we as an audit committee need to track those, who's doing what, by when, etc., etc. So your question is very valid, and it's something we shouldn't miss off, because mark my words that if you have Estin come in for an inspection and all of a sudden they pick up a report of 2007 and you haven't dealt with it, they will pick that up and say, why haven't you dealt with it? And that's why a tracker and actions and outcomes are very important.
And you can attest my memory now, but the last report has got that table in it, which has got by regulatory body, the recommendations and the actions being undertaken, the timescales associated with that, and who's responsible for it, and which committees are overseeing it, because a lot of this will go through. So, for instance, the education things will go through the scrutiny committee for people as well. So your role in that is ensuring that we've got mechanisms in place for delivering against that action, rather than monitoring the delivery of the action, if that makes sense.
Any other questions? Just a quick one from me. You've got 48 audits for this year, 23, 24, 48 audit opinion jobs, and we only delivered 38 last year. And you've also got 27 non-opinion jobs. All I'm just a little bit concerned is that we don't overcommit and under-deliver, because clearly in our target we had 80%, so that means you would have lost 10 immediately, and you only deliver 77%. So what I don't want is to set you up to fail. So I'm just saying that, and I presume that's with a full team of staff, the 48.
That's with the assuming that we'll fill the vacancies from the 1st of October, the 2 principal auditors, and also buying in resource from South West Audit Partnership of 80 days, yeah. So there's some assumptions there.
In regards to the filling of the posts from the 1st of October, are they going out to advert now, or are they going out on the 1st of October? So is it a salary saving being made here? And, you know, clearly when the advert goes up, if you've got someone with a reasonable skill set and qualifications, it's more likely they're going to have to give 3 months' notice. So, you know, is that going to slip into November, December, and Myron, are you going to pocket the salary saving into an account somewhere?
No, so actually Don and I are actively now talking about that recruitment process. Finishing off last year's work with the reports they've got here, getting the audit plan ready. The annual governance statement has been a priority for us until now. The recruitment is kind of next, to get the ball rolling there. And, you know, we'll be utilising all the social media tricks that we can. I'm even considering talking about the potential widening of the team and the attractiveness of that might, you know, we're going to do our best. In terms of what happens if we don't, then we will need to consider extending the work of swap. So we won't be banking the kind of saving. We'll be using the vacancy budget to bring in as much external help as that will buy, which is about half of what you know, a full-time council employee would be. But it's, yeah, we're not holding back on not spending that money. It's capacity of Donna actually, and the one principal auditor that we have, to be able to manage the swap. You can imagine they're slightly more intensive in terms of looking after them than your own staff, because they know your organisation. Although swap does know us reasonably well now, it's still a little bit more intensive. Yeah.
No, I understand that, but it's the date it is. Clearly we're at the end of May now. Even if you go out to advert middle of June, you're going to be giving, 3 weeks or something for a turnaround. That's the end of June. You're then going to have to interview or whatever, so that's the middle of July. So if they've got to give 3 months' notice, we're off into November, possibly December. So I'm just urging some caution, because these things do slip, and over the summer period they'll slip worse. So that's okay. Thanks, Myron. Yeah, and the other question was, which I raised on the other one, is it possible to prioritise the high risk audits first and then do the medium risks?
Yeah, we can with the available resource. Obviously, I'm limited in terms I've got different grades within the team, so I'm down to one principal auditor, but we will use the external resource because we do get a principal auditor from them. So yeah, we've had that conversation, Myron. We'll prioritise those high risks where we can.
We're saying then that high risk audits, you need a principal auditor?
Generally, yeah.
Right, okay. Okay, so there is a correlation then between staffing requirements and audits undertaken, isn't there?
Yeah.
So presumably that's why some of the high risk have not been done previously, because once you start losing your staff, you start losing that capacity and qualification. Okay, any other comments, anyone? Yes, Don.
I'm just going back, and this one for you, Chair, because I don't know as a committee, but if we're judging ourselves in terms of like on a self-assessment basis and how effective we are as a committee, and I don't know whether this can be made available to us, but when we've got a chart showing 74, nevers, 223 nevers, is whether we as a committee were able to see the rationale behind that, just so we say, yeah, that's sound, and doing that. Because at the moment I find myself sitting here thinking, I'm signing off on this because I have to, but it would be, I'm just wondering if there's any form that we can do on that.
I'd have to let Rhys and Myrian mull that over. That's a huge amount of work, I think, where, what amazes me, there are tables there which have got never, 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 and who assess that risk in regards to that service area. So, I take on board what you say, Don, but that would be a tremendous amount of work, I would have thought, for Donna and Myrian and their team to go through in regards to even identifying the list here. But I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, but I think it's a lot of work, Don.
I'll withdraw the comment then.
Can I just say one thing? I don't know whether it provides assurance or not. In terms of the nevers, which are down on the Appendix 3, the never does mean that it's never been audited as that job title, as that audit job. That doesn't necessarily mean that we've never had any coverage in that area. I think there could be common theme. We could do the common themes audit, the cross-cutting reviews, and these might be the reasons why we haven't done that specific audit job and it's fallen sort of lower down priority of the list, because there could have been some coverage, and we'll have the details of that when we consider them every year. So I don't know whether it provides assurance or not, but there could have been some coverage in the area, but not in its entirety as an audit job, if that makes sense.
It may be worthwhile then indicating, if you've got time and when you've got time, on that chart to say this may have been covered. Rather than never, just put an asterisk to say, well, an asterisk and the bottom saying this may have been covered under another, so that gives some reassurance, but hopefully I haven't opened you up to do more work on that.
No, thanks, and it's probably something we do need to consider, I think, because having that table, it's quite stark, isn't it?
It is.
In terms of the numbers that you've mentioned in terms of the never, so yeah, we can look at that.
Okay, I don't think it's a matter of urgency for the next month or so, but certainly maybe by the 24-25 audit plan. Yeah? Okay. Recommendation then is that the internal audit plan 23-24 be noted and approved by committee. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Harris. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Jordan. All in favour? Thank you very much. Item 12 on the report is the Forward Work Programme, which clearly has set out our work for the next municipal year. The only admission to the 27th of July is the Safeguarding Children's Money call-in. Pleased to be added. And just to update members, Rhys mentioned it as well. I've suggested to Rhys that we should do an annual report as a committee. We've only been in existence 12 months in the new format. it is good practice to do an annual report. CITFA actually say it's good practice as well to do an annual report. So I've been discussing with Reece that we do an annual report as a committee, not a long, drawn-out process, you know, piece of quick and dirty piece of work really to, you know, where we were, where we are, and where we're going to go. You know, lessons learned, good practice we've introduced, and that. Clearly, you as members of the committee will play a big part in that via a questionnaire, as will others. And clearly, there may be suggestions about improving the way things are done, or you know, I think mention's been made by Norma and Don about the action sheets or whatever. So anything we can tighten up, anything we can learn, then that will be done. So expect a questionnaire shortly. Hopefully you give us that support so that we can build then on for next year. I understand report hasn't been done in the past. So I think it would be good for us, us as a team of, as a committee to do that, take that forward. Okay. So we've got the recommendations that we endorse the proposed schedule for future meetings. And we confirm the list of people that we'd like to invite for each item and indicate whether any additional information or research is required. You can pick that up in regards as to we go through each one. So that's lovely. Someone move, please. Thank you. Councillor Horton, seconder. Councillor Mogford, all in favour. Thank you very much. Last item, date of next meeting is on the 27th of July 2023 at 5 o'clock in the council chamber. I will be accessing the meeting remotely, just to tell you, because I won't be in the country at the time. Can I just thank everyone for the meeting this evening? It's gone on quite a long time, but I think it's been quite a lot of constructive discussion and comment and debate. Certainly a lot of support from the officers and the officer team, and a lot of questioning, which I hope has gone down well to meet the assurance that we are to provide to the council. So thank you all for your input and have a safe journey home. Thank you very much.